Good morning, Revolution, and welcome to our weekly Friday morning podcast or little video. We're welcoming today Scott, a regular on GMR, and welcome back Jun from New York City, and welcome for the first time Molly from Cleveland, Ohio. We have kind of an Ohio takeover this morning of Good Morning Revolution. The Little Red Schoolhouse is happening, so a lot of our regulars are wrapped up in Marxist education today and all next week too. So it's an exciting time. We love this time every summer when the Little Red Schoolhouse takes place. But we couldn't miss this show because it's been another crazy week of news. I mean, really insane. And I think I've heard a lot of mainstream media people talking about how Lenin said there are weeks when decades happen. Well, apparently that was a misappropriation. But of course, the most stunning news that we heard was when Joe Biden last Sunday announced that he would not be the candidate for the Democratic Party going forward, and he endorsed his vice president, Kamala Harris. Now, Scott, just last week on Good Morning Revolution, you said everything is always in flux. You reminded us that we know that everything is dynamic. But at the time, and this was just last Friday, you said everything seems to be coming up fascist right now. And I wondered what your first of all, what was your first impression on hearing the news about Biden? And do you think that the chances of fascism being dealt a blow in November have changed now? What do you think?
Well, I think the mobilization we've seen around Vice President Harris's candidacy is really impressive. And also, we've seen the Trump campaign ramping up its racist and sexist rhetoric in a way that I think is going to kind of remind people. Trump took that sort of attempt at a unifying tone at the beginning of his speech at the RNC, and that's pretty much out the window now. So it is important to say that our party, our stance is the same as it was when the discussion was about should Biden drop out, et cetera. The candidates are not who's going to beat fascism. The candidates are not the leaders of the fight against fascism. That's the people, the masses in motion, the movements for reproductive justice, for LGBTQ plus rights, for labor rights, for immigrant rights, for African American liberation. Those and other movements are the ones that are going to beat fascism, and the candidates are just, they come out of those or are propelled by those movements. But I'm feeling good.
Yeah, all right. Thanks, Scott. Molly, now you're the organizer in a club, a collectivity in Cleveland that is very youth oriented. And I wondered also, what was your first impression on hearing this news? And do you think that the enthusiasm about electoral politics will change among young people, especially young people in the Northeast, like Cleveland? What do you think, Molly?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is quite a difference in the mood surrounding her candidacy in 2020 versus now. In bourgeois politics, fundraising is a measure of support. She's raised over $130 million in 3 days. And I think it is worthy of note that while AIPAC raised over 5.2 million for Biden, they've only raised about 182,000 for Kamala directly. Now, most of, all of that 5.2 is transferring to her. So we don't know if that's really a measure of their caution or just, well, we've already raised money. So it's, we'll be waiting to find out what her position is on the Gaza war, which is a key issue for young people. She has expressed empathy and support for the students on campuses, more so than Biden over the past 4 years. And look, she's a woman rising to prominence in the wake of the fall of Roe. She's a childless cat lady, the childless cat lady that JD Vance attacked. And of course, she has actually raised young people in her blended family. But we know that Kamala could never have risen to the height that she is if she had been a twice divorcee with 5 kids from 3 different men. So I think that this election really is about young people. It's about women. It's about people of color rising up and defending the democratic changes that we have won. And I think that it's about unions too. Kamala has walked the picket lines. She's a strong supporter of the PRO Act. She's personally prosecuted big banks and garnered millions of dollars back to consumers. And I hope that young communists are taking note of the shifting material conditions here, because this election is about creating conditions for broader, more successful class struggles, affordable child care and elder care. These are things that she has led efforts on, reproductive freedom, the end to white male terrorism in our public schools, largely white male, in our gay bars and our places of worship. So there's a real core contradiction here between fascism and the democratic forces, the forces for equality. I think youth are taking note.
Okay. Thank you. And I like to shout out to cat ladies, as I am one as well. I did have children, and one of my children has just brought his cats over for me to take care of. So now I have a lot of cats, temporarily, hopefully. So thank you, Molly. John, you work with a lot of home care workers in New York City, and who have very difficult, demanding jobs. I think the last time you were on Good Morning Revolution, you told us a little bit about these workers who sometimes work 24 hours a day for 12 hours pay. And I wonder what the people that you work with, what did they met? What was your first impression of this changeover dramatically this week? And what are the workers that you work with? What are they making of the national election scene?
So yeah, it's an interesting time with kind of a lot of these older and immigrant workers. So one of the real scary parts of the Trump kind of like rhetoric and campaign is how he builds such a mass movement around kind of like the fascist response to immigration, and it's it can get kind of scary for people organizing against them, because we see that even it's not just white men that are taken by this rhetoric, right? Like working class people of color see that there's an influx of people coming in, and us in New York, our state is prioritizing taking care of these people, which is absolutely the correct thing to do since they're here. But the Democratic Party doesn't really have the answer to make the people already here, struggling under the current administration, to feel safe, right? I think both parties need to, and Kamala especially, needs to face kind of like the question of Palestine and the genocide of Gaza, and kind of like our meddling in Venezuela, creating this influx of all of these refugees, right? And that'll make our own people feel a lot better. And so I'm looking forward to what Kamala will say about this war happening today.
Thank you. Yeah, and we'll talk about Netanyahu's visit, but before we get there, Molly, Jessica Valenti had a really good point she made today. She said it's fine when race and gender play a role in one's vote, and representation actually matters. And we've been told by white male candidates that when we vote for a white man, we're not voting for gender and race. but when a black woman is running, it seems to be that. Now, Harris is, of course, going to be the first woman, would be the first woman president, the first African American woman president, of course, and the first person of Indian descent. And Molly, what do you make of this selection? Is this a real historic first for us? And do you think that is really what is its significance for you?
Well, I think if she is the candidate that wins, then I think it is historic. We had another woman run for president, against Donald Trump before, and that did not come out in favor of Hillary Clinton. And so, I think we'll see. But yeah, just I think Scott also spoke to how the Republican Party is using DEI as the new N word, and they recently, one of the Fox News hosts even used the C word to describe a sorority. So I think the right wing, their vitriol will come out more and more as the months go by, and I think people will hopefully defend themselves against this. I've seen memes kind of reclaiming the childless cat lady thing, and I think for me that was really, it's been really helpful to see, because I think as more people are present with the right wing attacks, the more support we have. Because in Ohio, I remember Vance said that, and it did kind of stick in my ear for the last couple of years. Like, oh my God, I'm a childless cat lady. So like to see, the support come out now to oppose this on a national level, I think is a beautiful thing.
Okay, thank you. And June, of course, we balance that in our party with the idea that we really need to focus on the issues. What are the issues that we're looking at in this election? And then we could really make a choice of whom to vote for based on the issues. And what do you think are the most salient issues going forward into November? For you and for the people that you work with?
There's probably a couple I can think of. For myself, it's just the idea of a free Palestine, or an end to the genocide, and everybody at the worker center, all of the home care workers. These are people that read international news, right? Not in English. We don't read the New York Times, and we all have a very sober and clear understanding of the genocide, and we are all against it, right? And so, like, first there's that, and there's also, of course, well, we're trying to get everybody to vote for Kamala, right? For not because of kind of like her identity, but because of what we're afraid Trump will do, right? Today we use the Department of Labor, the NLRB, all as kind of like tools to progress our struggle to end the 24-hour workday. With the Trump presidency, DOL, like NLRB, all of that is going away. Not to mention the crumbs that kind of our current liberal government gives us in the form of SNAP benefits and Social Security, right? 99% of our organizing is done outside of the electoral arena, right? But all of that would be that much more difficult with the Trump presidency and the policies that he brings in.
Absolutely, thank you. Finally, Scott, finally on this topic, Scott, Biden said, I don't know if you saw Biden's speech on Tuesday night where he explained to the people why he stepped down, but he said one of the reasons was to unify the Democratic Party. And do you think this changeover to Kamala Harris instead of Joe Biden, do you think that has a will have an impact on unifying the working class electorate? Do you think that there's a potential for unity on the part of the working class as a whole, rather than just the Democratic Party?
I think unity is always something we have to work for. I think there's often this misconception in bourgeois politics that like if we just pick the right person, everybody's gonna, fall in line and we'll be unified. And that's not how it works. No matter who the candidate is, unity is something we have to fight for. Not just unity, obviously, within the Democratic Party, because that's not whatever, that's the Democratic Party's business. But unity within the working class, especially, is something we have to fight for constantly because it's constantly under attack by the forces of the capitalist class. So I think Charles Blow in the New York Times had a great opinion piece today, yesterday, saying Democrats have to protect Harris. They have to rally around her, all of them. Regardless, and he drew special attention to the fact that there's this practice of raising up an oppressed person, a woman, a person of color, into a position of prominence at a moment of crisis, and sort of setting them up to kind of fail. The glass cliff, he called it, with respect to women in particular, and he said that that's a danger here, and the unity around unity around the Harris candidacy is. Within the Democratic Party is going to be important. Unity around the struggle against fascism and the priorities that Jun and Molly have both mentioned for the working class is going to be incredibly important. Just getting out there and telling people, look, it's really a question between do we want SNAP, or do we want it to disappear? Do we want labor protections or no? Do we want environmental protections or no? Do we want concentration camps and promises of mass deportations of immigrants or no? Do we want space to struggle or no? And that's where we are. Unity is something we have to fight for, but I think the stakes are becoming clearer and clearer to people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, well put. Well, moving on, we Donald Trump, of course, isn't the only world stage actor who is desperate to cling to office in order to avoid accountability for past crimes. There's also Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu came to Washington this week and visited Congress. He claimed he was looking for unity too. He wanted a bipartisan, but really was amazingly ununifying in the first few minutes of his speech. But Molly, I wonder if you may have seen some of Netanyahu's speech, or you may have seen the big demonstrations that were going on outside Capitol Hill. And I wondered what do you think about the visit to Congress that Netanyahu made? Did what was his purpose in coming, and did he achieve that? And what do you think?
So yeah, I think there's been some developments there when it comes to the peace movement. Regardless of the war criminal Netanyahu's goals, I think in 2005, we saw 50 congressional representatives boycott his speech, but this year it was over 100, and I think there's definitely been a sea change that he's not able to handle. He needs to take accountability. They had so few people listening to his speech that they had to bring in fillers, and I noticed, I saw Elon Musk was one of those fillers. But Nancy Pelosi boycotted this speech, and she had met with an Israeli hostage family member before deciding to boycott his speech. She called it by far the worst presentation of any foreign dignitary. And there were hostages who came into the speech, or hostages' families, relatives that came into the speech, and they wore wore T-shirts that said "Sign the deal now," and were removed and detained. We had hundreds of people inside. Jewish Voice for Peace organized protesters. Beautiful photos, and many of them got arrested, and then of course thousands outside. So I just think that his coming to the States marked more so a historical development in our movement for peace. And I would love to share a quote from our comrade in Ofer Kasif in Israel. He had a remark about it. He said, the painful truth must be told. Netanyahu is a war criminal and a mass murderer. He is the head. He is the culprit in the genocidal massacre in Gaza, in the destruction, in the starvation and thirst, in the annihilation of hospitals, educational and religious institutions, in the obliteration of entire families from the face of the earth, in sacrificing the hostages to torturing and soldiers as cannon fodder, and all just to stay in power and persist in his malicious plan, the destruction of the Palestinian people and the establishment of a full-fledged racist, fascist dictatorship in Israel. So, our struggles are linked against fascism here and to end the genocide in Gaza.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's a great quote from our comrade in the Israeli Communist Party. June, what struck you about the visit from Netanyahu at this particular time, and maybe if you've heard about that development where 12 unions have called for cutting military aid to unions? Do you see unions as more of a role, taking more of a role in demanding a change in our policy towards Israel?
Yeah, I would hope for the unions to. I've seen it, and it makes me so glad to see the unions taking this role and calling for, as organized workers to call for a demand to end all of this funding for Israel and their genocide. And what inspired me even more are just all the thousands of the of regular everyday people kind of really coming together in DC, including a lot of people from our own party that that are not even involved in the unions. Union membership is very low today, right? I and I would actually like for the unions to take even more of a leading role in this job. And so, it's incredible to see both uh, both union workers and non-union folk coming together and just saying, no, we as people in this country, as workers, we reject this genocide. Not in our names, as
Mhm.
working people, as people of this country.
Mhm. It was beautiful to see that group of demonstrators with the T-shirts that said "Not in our name" in the Capitol. Scott, probably the most under reported development this week. I know it's been a big week of news, but apparently Chinese diplomats have managed to unite 14 different Palestinian factions in what they call the Beijing Declaration to End the Division and Strengthen Palestinian National Unity. Scott, what do you think about this development, and do you think it'll be a lasting unity? It happened over like 3 days of diplomatic talks with the Chinese. Do you think this will be something that we'll look back on and wonder why we didn't think more about it this week with all of the other things going on?
Well, I think it's
Scott?
an extremely important development. It's a development that every person who supports peace, supports Palestinian liberation, should salute, should look to, and it's worth mentioning that this is not the first time that China has played a role like this. So the rivalry, in particular between Hamas and Fatah, is a very deep and long-standing one. Building unity there is not easy, but both the circumstances are exceptional. The need is pressing. Similarly to what we saw in France with the New Popular Front, some of those parties have deep, long-standing historical grievances with one another, and there was a pressing need to defeat the extreme right, and they were able to rise to the challenge. In terms of China's role, earlier this year, Iran and Saudi Arabia engaged in talks that were facilitated by the Chinese government. Again, a very, very deep rivalry, but one that people are working to overcome in the interest of building a counterweight to the violence of U.S. imperialism and the violence of the Israeli genocide in Gaza. So it's extremely important, and it's also just important to know that the United States tends to think of itself as the only country entitled to broker these big geopolitical deals, and no country is the indispensable. No nation is the indispensable nation, right? A nation that can play a progressive role in uniting people and pushing for peace. That's the most important thing right now.
Thank you. Yeah, well, we're are moving on to our last topic for today, and really kind of we're going from the international and the national to the very local. But we have some horrific cases of police violence this week also to deal with. One of them that we're not mentioning too much on is means something to me because of the Columbus police were involved. They were in the Milwaukee to moonlight and do security for the RNC, and they saw a homeless man in an altercation with someone else and gunned him down. His name was Sam Sharp, a venerable name. Sam Sharp was the Jamaican hero of the 1865 Morant Bay Rebellion. So everyone in Jamaica knows the name Sam Sharp, and he happened to have the same name. But even more disturbing was the news coming out of Chicago about Sonya Massey. She was a 36-year-old woman, and she was June. What did happen? What do we know about the case of Sonya Massey? Do you have any? I mean, are there parallels in New York at this time? June?
I'm not aware of the last time someone was gunned down in their own home while unarmed by the. I just can't remember the last time that had happened. This is like something that happens too often in this country. From what I know had happened was, Sonya had called the police because she was afraid of like a prowler outside or something, and two deputies had come in and told her to kind of like turn off the heat on her stove, and she did, and I believe she was cooking up some boiling water or something, and the cops suddenly drew their weapons and demanded her to put down the coffee that she was preparing, and that she had picked up basically at the officer's own demands. And then, they gunned her down for fear of their own life. And it was just kind of just obscene to read about or imagine that, that it absolutely disgusting behavior. And when you hear about the words and conversations that the cops had after they murdered her, and just the complete lack of empathy, right? I believe the deputy said, like, don't waste your med kits. It was a headshot. Who I you know Absolutely disgusting behavior. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. I'm so
I know it's horrible, and I do remember having I witnessed some police training one time for a research project, and it was just amazing to me how these police trainers, talk about a good shoot and a bad shoot. It's not even thinking about, well, who's getting killed here. It's all good or bad depending on whether the police will face accountability or not. It's very disturbing. So, well, Scott, Chicago is one of your hometowns. I know you claim Chicago as a hometown. Now, Massey, I understand, was killed by a sheriff's deputy. Does that mean this is outside? Maybe you don't know this technical thing, but is it outside Chicago's control of the police, that citizens' control of the police that we've just passed in Chicago, just in the last couple of years?
So you're right. I do not know. I can't give you an exact answer. I believe the sheriff is a county role, whereas the civilian oversight bodies that were elected are specifically for the Chicago police. So I'm not sure that but that said, those civilian, police accountability councils, that's the original name. I can't remember the real name of them, but those came out of a huge militant movement against police brutality, and that movement still exists, and it's not going away. So that the technicality is not going to prevent people from mobilizing, both to mourn and to honor yet another person murdered by the police, but to demand that the state stop murdering people in their homes, in the streets. It's ridiculous.
Thank you. Well, finally, Molly, we to bring it all back to our original conversation about elected officials, we have we concentrate on talking about the issues, and the issue of protection from police is a big issue, and Donald Trump has called for complete immunity. He's big on the immunity thing. Complete immunity for police. He's gone out of his way over and over again to underscore that. Do you think that that will be an issue that will mobilize voters this November?
Yeah, thank you for lifting that. Sometimes it's hard to remember all of the details of his platform, but that's a really key one. He believes that cops should not be prosecuted for the crimes that they commit while in office. I mean, Macy's killer never should have been a cop. He switched from 6 different police forces in 4 years. He had 2 DUIs. So, police officers are not, some angelic, idyllic creation. They are people with influences of capitalist ideology, just like anyone else. And it needs to be they need to be held to the standards of the law. They have committed incredible.
Molly seems to be frozen. Oh dear. Okay, well, have we got her back yet? Or am I the one that's frozen here?
We can hear you, Anita.
Okay, it's not me. Oh, there you are, Molly. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
froze in the middle of your.
Okay, well, you know, 50% of killings of cops by cops have been of disabled people, and
Mhm.
you know, Macy was one. She called for help, just like Tanisha Anderson did in Cleveland, and she was also killed, and the police they totally disrespected her family, Macy's family. They you know, the family found out about that it was a police killer from the news. They even heard it was a story of a suicide. That it wasn't an officer that killed her, that she maybe took her own life. There was a massive cover up. Police forces need to be prosecuted. Communities need to have control over our police, because there's systemic issues that have resulted in the deaths of Macy, of Black women killed in their homes, like Breonna Taylor, Tatiana Jefferson. She was a mother. She left behind children, and you know, it's just such a lie that she was coming after that cop with the boiling water. I mean, there is a huge counter in between him and her, and stuff all on top of it. He's just a racist and a bigot, and he has no control of his impulses. So so back to your question, sorry, you know, I think that Trump is clearly different than his opponents on this, who support the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, who've condemned this killing. And you know, I think that at the same time that Kamala Harris, as a Black woman, is being risen to these heights, we also have a Black woman being slain by police, and I think we need to take stock of the uneven development of our movement here, and to understand our shortcomings. We still have a long way to go to bring about a world, a society of equality and justice for all.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Molly. That would be a great last word for us. I mean, we have a long way to go. We have a lot of struggle ahead of us, and demanding, along with the masses of people that our elected officials take positions that really support the people. So that's it for today. Thank you to Jun and Molly and Scott for being here, and thank you to our producer, a dog lady, proud dog lady, mother of Gus. So we really appreciate all of your work today, and we'll see you next week for another Good Morning Revolution. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Later,